This video is going to be extremely critical for all the French players out there. Today we are going to discuss the game between Magnus Carlsen versus Richard Rapport from the Green Chess Classic in Open 2024. It's a rapid tournament, 45 minutes plus 10-second increment. This game is just too much instructive. I don't want to waste any further time, so let's start. So Magnus is playing with the white pieces, and Magnus starts with 1 e4. And Richard Rapport plays the move e6, the French defense. We have the move d4, d5, knight to c3, and here we have the move bishop to b4, the Vinava variation. Now another move is knight f6, which is the second most popular move, where the game continues with e5, knight d7, f4, c5, and the game goes on. Going back, we have the move bishop b4, the main theory, e5, c5, a3, takes, and now we have the move knight to e7, queen to g4, queen to c7, till now all pretty common, and here we have the move bishop to d3. All those who don't know, bishop d3 is considered one of the most annoying line for black, I would say, because after bishop d3, the main line here is cd4, knight to e2, basically stopping queen c3. So here we have the move dc3, queen takes, rook g8, queen h7, and here when black captures the pawn on e5, we play the move h4, knight d7, bishop f4, queen f6, bishop g5, and we have a queen trade. And after knight takes, the idea is to play the move knight b5. So black plays the a6, and after long castle, f6, bishop e3. So basically what's happening in this position? We are on the move number 18, and it's still a pretty well-known theory. So basically white is having a strong outside pass pawn on the h5, and at the same time white is also having the bishop pair, which is just covering the light and the dark squares at the same time. So this is a position which is like too much safe for white. At the worst case scenario, white is just getting a draw, and in the best case, white is simply going to win the game. So this is exactly why this line is particularly so annoying for black. So going back, after bishop d3, we have the move queen to a5 by Richard Rapport. This is a move which really excites me. So after queen f5, what is the idea? Queen f5, the idea is to simply capture the pawn, give a check, and also capture the rook. If white tries to play something like knight e2 defending the pawn, we can play the move c4. And now suddenly the bishop is simply trapped on d3. So for example, after queen g7, rook g8 takes, we can happily capture the bishop, and black is pretty happy. Going back, knight e2 is not really working. So bishop d2 was played by Magnus Carlsen, which was a pretty good move defending the c3 pawn. And also there could be a possibility of even pushing the pawn to c4 further. We have the move c4 instead, stopping white to play the move c4, and now playing c4 ourselves, hitting the bishop, kicking the bishop back, and now playing the move rook to g8, not allowing white to capture the pawn on g7. So here white plays the move a4, which is a very important move to be considered, because for rook g8, black's idea is really to play the move queen f4 and put pressure on the pawn on c2, which is a usual idea for black. So white plays a4, not allowing black queen to sit on a4, and also at the same time preparing some ideas with bishop c3, bishop c1, bishop e3 could be some ideas in the air. So we have the move knight c6, simply developing the knight, queen to h3, attacking the h7 pawn, h6, bishop to h5, keeping an eye on the f7 pawn in the position, bishop to d7, and here we have the move knight to e2, developing the knight. Richard Rapport played g6, attacking the bishop, even h5 further, kicking the bishop back, and now playing the move knight to f5, putting the knight at the best square. We have the move g4, attacking the knight, pawn takes, bishop takes, and now we have the move simply long castle. And suddenly, I feel in this position, black's pretty good in the position, doing pretty fine, because black has successfully long castled. There are now no problems at the king side, because everything is pretty well protected, and somehow I feel there could be some chances for even black to put some pressure on the a4 pawn and now start generating some play on the queen side. So after a long castle, the engine says it's an even position, so we have the move bishop into f5, and here Richard captured with the pawn. At the first glance, many of the players would think, why not to capture with the g pawn, because it opens up the rook. Yes guys, I do agree with that, but at the same time, the f7 pawn is very weak, and you are not very well sure where to put the knight from c6 to anywhere. So going back, Richard captured with the pawn, and now the idea is to put the c6 knight to e6 at the best square. So we have the move bishop g5, attacking the rook, rook e8, king to d2, and now we have the move rook to h8, attacking the queen, kicking the queen, and now playing the move knight to d8. The idea is to simply put the knight on the move e6. So we have the move bishop to f6, attacking the rook, rook to h6, and here we have the move h4. Magnus decided to push the pawn further. Knight to e6, and here we have the move h5 by Magnus, which allowed black to play the move g5. I personally believe Magnus should have played the move first queen to e3, covering all the squares, and now maybe he can prepare to play the move h5. But h5 simply allowed g5 because in this position, Magnus can't really capture the pawn on f5 because it simply allows knight g4 attacking the queen, and now white simply lost a very critical pawn which makes all the pawns of white very weak. So going back, after g5, now black is actually having a very strong pawn chain. Now we have the move rook to e1, and here black played the move f4, which was a bad move. Richard should have played the move b6 in the position, just put the king to b7, try to keep the safety of the king at the first glance, but he first played the move f4, which simply allowed Magnus to find an incredibly strong move, which is to play the move rook to g1. And now white's idea is really to capture the g5 pawn. So Richard has to play rook to g8 defending the pawn, but this simply allowed Magnus to play the move knight into f4, simply capturing a pawn. Now what's exactly happening? You can't really capture the knight with the pawn because the rook is simply hanging on g8. And if you really capture the knight with the knight, now you can happily sacrifice the queen, pawn takes, and now simply capturing the rook. The point here is after king c7, I can simply play the move bishop to d8 check, taking away the queen, and white is completely winning. So that's exactly what happens if you cannot really capture with the knight. So here first Richard decided to capture the bishop to stop any bishop to d8 check ideas. So after rook into f6, we have the move pawn takes, and now we have the move knight takes. So what is really happening in the position material wise? White is having 7 pawns and black is having 6 pawns, but at the same time black is having 2 minor pieces against the rook, but white is just having too much strong pawn on the h5. Okay, so what's happening? White is really slightly better. So knight into f4, and here Magnus decided to simply push the pawn to h6 further. Knight to e6, h7, rook to h8, and now we have to move queen to e3. Centralizing the queen, the idea is to put the queen to e5 at the best square. So queen to d8, and now simply capturing the pawn on g5, a brilliant move I would say, simply sacrificing the rook for a knight and the pawn. Takes, and now we have this position. So what's happening? Black is having a whole piece for I would say like 2 pawns. But the point here is the h7 pawn is just too strong. Now after queen g5, we have the move king c7, queen to g7, bishop to e6, and now we have the move rook to e1 by Magnus. So Magnus' idea is to play the move rook e5, f4 followed by f5 attacking the bishop. But at the place of going for this maneuver, a better maneuver would have been to play the move first rook h5, and now the idea is to play the move f4 f5. But because at the same time the rook on h5 also defends the pawn on h7. But going back, it doesn't really matter much. Rook e1, we have the move rook e5, f4, king to c1, king f7, and now finally we have the move f5, basically distracting the pawn, and the idea is to simply capture the f7 pawn. So here Richard played the move bishop to g7, a very interesting move. The basic point here is if white captures the pawn on d5, black is going to capture the pawn on a4, which actually gives black a bit of a counterplay because it just simply activates the bishop. White just needs to find queen c6 and just get in the white's camp. So first Magnus was pretty sharp in his play. He first played the move a5, blocking the queen side I would say. Queen to f8, and now he simply played the move king b2. Because queen a3 was a big threat. So first just simply playing queen b2, king to b2 because black cannot really capture the queen because it's completely winning position for white. So we have the move queen to c8, and now we have Magnus simply chop off a pawn. Bishop to c6, rook to e5, and Magnus again chopped off another pawn. The position is completely winning because white is having just too much strong pawns on the king side. So bishop takes pawn, rook to c5, takes, rook to c7, and now just simply playing the move rook g7, sacrificing the pawn on h7. Okay, you can capture with the rook because I can happily trade off the rooks, and now it's unstoppable queen. So we have the move bishop takes, and now Magnus simply played the move f7, and the position is completely winning for white. The idea is pretty simple. White's idea is to simply capture the bishop because after rook take, white can happily make a queen. So here you have to move the bishop in the position. So here Richard Rapport simply played the move bishop to d3, and Magnus simply chopped off the bishop. And after cd3, Richard Rapport decided to resign the game. So basically Richard was, I guess, expecting Magnus to play something like this, and now he was just banking on this rook h2, but it doesn't really matter, it's still winning. It doesn't matter what Richard does. Magnus simply captures the bishop and it's completely winning. The point is pretty simple. If you try to give me a check, I can go to a3. And now after rook to f2 trying to block this pawn, I can happily capture the pawn, and I'm having just 3 pawns advantage. I can just bring my king, push the d pawn, and eventually black has to resign in the position. So that's exactly why Richard Rapport decided to resign the game. But overall speaking up, Richard Rapport really played a brilliant game. If he wouldn't have been paired against Magnus, I think he probably must have won the game, because the game he played was pretty interesting, I would say. Like in this particular position, he found the move queen f5, bishop d2, c4. I'm pretty sure this was all his preparation. Rook g8, a4, knight c6. And just doing a long castle, I simply liked this idea just too much. And now, just like if white is not really pretty much sharp like Magnus, black is simply going to capture, like put the rook to e8, put the knight to e6, capture the pawn on a4, generating some queenside play, and eventually black will win the game. So overall, the point is Magnus is the champion of the Green Chess Classic Open 2024. But overall, saying up, Richard Rapport really did play a very well game in the French defense opening with the black pieces. So if you guys learned anything new in this particular video, make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you are new to our channel. I'm going to see you soon, so till then stay tuned and keep watching One Shot Chess.